The mission has begun, and now we're up against the enemy. We learn that stealth is our top priority, and so it is our mentor, the boss, who explains the basics of camouflage to us.
Also, don't forget that anything that moves will stand out in the jungle. If you just stand up and run around like an idiot, you're bound to be spotted. But if you crawl instead, you should be able to sneak by without being noticed.
Properly dressed and undetected, Snake soon reaches the remains of a factory, within which is his imprisoned target, Sokolov, who is busy tossing documents into the fireplace.
You must be Sokolov.
Are you one of Volgin's men? You'll never get it from me.
No.
All Snake needs to do is mention that he was sent there by Zero, and that's enough to assuage Sokolov's fears. In exchange, the scientist volunteers information of his own, explaining who Volgin is. Thunderbolt, as he's known in the West, although neither name rings a bell for Snake.
He's a member of the Army's extremist faction, a man who seeks to seize control of the motherland. Ever since the Cuban Missile Crisis 2 years ago, Khrushchev has been pursuing a policy of peaceful coexistence with the West. Despite resistance and criticism from hawks in the army and the provincial authorities, Khrushchev has managed to suppress the opposition so far. But the failure of his agricultural policies has put him in a precarious position. And on top of that, the tragedy last November.
President Kennedy's assassination.
Volgin has seized this opportunity, using it to install his own men into the government, with Brezhnev and Kosygin to overthrow Khrushchev. Aside from Volgin, these are all real historical figures, but means of political manipulation were not enough for Volgin. He seeks the firepower to match. That's where Sokolov comes into the picture. He can provide Volgin with an incredibly unique and powerful weapon, the nature of which he won't divulge just yet. Cautiously exiting his prison, Sokolov follows behind Snake, but the two of them are soon ambushed by the KGB troops Snake had been so careful to avoid on the way in. It seems the mission has failed already, until the sound of spurs can be heard. In walks a very young man, a familiar character behind an unfamiliar face. Ocelot. Just Ocelot for now. No revolver just yet.
Ha! That's Major Ocelot to you. And don't you forget it.
Ocelot effortlessly takes down every one of the KGB troops before turning his attention to the man he thinks is the boss. Does he truly mistake Snake for the boss? Or is he here to intervene and allow Snake's mission to succeed? We'll never know for certain. Soon, the rest of the Ocelot unit comes to back him up, and Ocelot takes this time to make fun of Snake's CQC stunts.
What is that stance?
This will bite him in the ass in a second when his gun jams and Snake throws him to the ground. Now it's Snake's turn to criticize Ocelot's technique.
You ejected the first bullet by hand, didn't you? I see what you were trying to do, but testing a technique you've only heard about in the middle of battle wasn't very smart.
Next, Snake reunites with Sokolov, and the scientist shows him the Shagohod, the secret weapon he has been made to work on. The two then cross a nearby bridge, only to be stopped by none other than the boss herself. She had lied. She had never been hiding in a Permit-class submarine in the Arctic Ocean. She had defected to the Soviet Union. But before that shock can fully sink in for Snake, they are then swarmed by Hornets, and Sokolov is snatched up into the helicopter above by one of the Cobra unit. They have united once more to aid the boss in her mission. They are then joined by yet another character, Colonel Volgin himself.
Kuwabara, Kuwabara!
Volgin wants Snake dead, so the boss does the honors, breaking Snake's arm and tossing him off the side of the bridge. Snake manages to survive, primarily because the boss intended him to do so. It's up to the paramedic to instruct him on how to treat his injuries. He uses the boss's scarf as a sling. Some time passes and Snake sees the Shagohod being transported by 5 helicopters. One of those helicopters contains the boss, and as if by fate, their eyes lock. They both extend a hand in each other's direction. For the boss, it is a parting gesture. For Snake, it is a desperate grasp. Meanwhile, on another helicopter, Volgin savors his new toys. Ocelot's attention, however, is elsewhere, suddenly noticing the woman on board with them. They believe her to be Tatiana, Sokolov's woman. She is in fact Eva, another spy. Volgin pulls his attention from his weapons to Eva. As he closes in on her, she reveals she's not defenseless. Eva reaches for a lipstick gun, a weapon that would seem to be the product of a spy novel, but it did in fact exist.
Shall we take her back to the base?
Perhaps we should. We have no further use for Sokolov's research facility. I think it's time I gave this marvelous new toy a try.
Colonel, even if they are our enemies, they're still our countrymen.
But it won't be me that pulled the trigger. It'll be our friend, the American defector.
You're going to nuke your fellow Russians?
Remember the Alamo.
Colonel!
Volgin launches a nuke down at the facility, irradiating Snake from a distance. Virtuous Mission has failed. Ask the Metal Girl. You are listening to Metal Girl Solid, one woman's journey through a series she knows nothing about. My name is Courtney Colson. Welcome to episode 2. This block begins with Snake saying, "Major, I've spotted 2 enemies," as he looks through his binoculars, and ends with a nuclear explosion and the failure of the Virtuous Mission. This block is actually 45 minutes long, so we can just cut neatly at the end of the mission. Alright, so we are less than an hour into the plot of Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. And when I played this the first time, obviously the tragedy of this reveal of the boss having defected to the Soviet Union didn't fully sink in, or I didn't understand the full story. So for me, and I think a lot of fans, even now I see having that reaction of, oh, so I guess she's a villain? And well, obviously by the time I get to the end of the story, I realize, oh, no, this is much more complicated than heroes and villains, and it's not that simple. But it frustrates me that, yeah, that's the impression many players have, that, oh, well, she's the villain, right? I'm surprised that people get through the entire game believing that, because to me, I think there's a point somewhere around, well, there's always hints. She's not fully switch sides. There's just a little hint here and that she's trying to help Snake and Eva in moments. At the end, it should be apparent, but no, apparently some players just go, oh, well, she defected to the Soviet Union, so she's the villain, right? End of story. Now, in the original script, supposedly, the boss was supposed to throw down her bandana from the hind helicopter, and Snake would catch it. Being of a costume designer background, I love the use of clothing as storytelling, and this little gesture would have changed so much about the meaning of that bandana. If she had given him that bandana, that symbolizes her letting go of her past and her identity and passing on the torch to Snake. But instead, in the final version, we have Snake snatching the bandana from her, taking it from her, grasping for whatever trace of her that he could hold on to keep. And I think that totally changes the context. Which do I prefer? I think if she gave him the bandana, that's too early of a reveal. I think in this scene, you should absolutely believe, oh, shit, she's betrayed us. You should feel the way Snake does. You're just blindsided by this betrayal. And so if she hands over that bandana, there's a little sign. Hey, the little glimmer of hope. I still care about you. Whereas in the version we get, it's more of a case of, boss, why did you defect to the Soviet Union? Don't leave me. I love you. Come back. The thing that felt most incongruous to me about this game was that Naked Snake is supposed to be this Green Beret, that's special operations, that's real high-level stuff. he is having to have really basic things explained to him, camouflage, weapons, stealth. These are things that he should be an expert at. That seems non-diegetic, I suppose. It kind of breaks the illusion. I am not this skilled soldier. I am an idiot who have somehow been thrown into this very high-risk situation. I understand now that this is a prequel, and that means that they are stuck with characters being a certain age at a certain time. Although I don't know, was it established in other games when Big Boss was born, how old he would be, why set it in the 1960s? Is it just because Kojima kind of wanted to do a bit of a James Bond thing? Was it because he wanted to tell the story in the height of the Cold War? I don't know. I don't know where this story is going, and I don't know how this fits into the greater storyline, so I don't know if it is crucial to have it be a Cold War story, because from what I've gathered from the Solid Snake stuff, just from visuals, it looks kind of futuristic, cyberpunk, not really connected with real-world history. So I don't know, we'll see. But as it stands, okay, you want to set your story in the 1960s. This is the origin story of Big Boss. Either you have to make him younger. In this game as it is, I think he's 29 years old. He's nearly 30. He's a Green Beret. He should be well aware of first aid and CQC and camo and all of that. And having those tutorials sort of does this character a disservice. So how do you teach your player how this game works in a diegetic way without breaking that illusion? And they have broken the illusion. Especially when I was playing this game for the first time, my impression wasn't, oh yeah, I am this hardened Green Beret. No, I'm playing an idiot, a himbo, as the kids say. I'm trying to think of stories where the tutorial is a part of the narrative, and usually you are a character who is inexperienced. I don't know why the first thing that comes to mind is Pokemon. You are a 12-year-old kid who for some reason is being allowed to wander around unsupervised with battle animals. That makes sense, you're a child. But when you are playing, I don't know, The Witcher or Baldur's Gate or whatever else I'm playing, Resident Evil, those games I've been playing recently, the information relevant to the player in order to play the game is just text on the screen most of the time. Press triangle to do this and that. I'm thinking the only way around this would have had to have been to make Snake much younger and much less experienced, but you're sending someone into Soviet territory alone. This is not a rookie mission. And if I do find time in this or any other episode, I do want to go into confirmed cases of espionage of American spies entering Soviet territory. It wasn't easy, let me tell you. So the Green Berets, formerly Special Forces, are an elite unit of the US Army specializing in counterinsurgency. The Green Berets, whose berets can be colors other than green, came into being in 1952. They were active in the Vietnam War, and they have been sent to US-supported governments around the world to help combat guerrilla insurgencies. And as I mentioned in that SOG book, SOG was all Green Berets, I believe, or the Montagnards and a few other factions, but primarily that is what the Green Berets were up to during the 60s. So where was Snake after the Korean War? The Korean War was from 1950 to 1953. We know that Snake hasn't seen the boss in about 5 years, so that's 1959. And looking on the wiki, aside from a possibly apocryphal scenario from Portable Ops, I believe, in 1961, working along Python in the early stages of the Vietnam War. Yeah, so that's my main question here is, most of the Green Berets are all involved with Vietnam. What was Snake doing at the time? Was he also involved with that at any stage? I would be surprised if he wasn't. Another thing that is quite interesting to note is that Snake doesn't have a rank. He is never referred to by any rank. Even when he becomes the leader of a private military, it is just boss. They do not give him a specific rank, and I wonder why that was. Now, a thought I had about Sokolov. In this story, he is just an average Russian civilian. He didn't have any military affiliations before now, which sounds very unlikely. So he was just this optimistic rocket scientist putting man into space. But given the time period, it would have been more likely that he was a former Nazi scientist. So there was Operation... Oh god, it's Russian. Osovakim? And Operation Paperclip, which you might have heard of, were both operations that recruited former Nazi scientists to the employ of the USA or the USSR. And I think it might have been interesting if Sokolov was one such immigrant. It would challenge the player's empathy, which is what this game already does, that Sokolov may have served the Nazis, but ultimately he was just a man doing his job, protecting his family. The larger political impact of his job doesn't reflect on his personal morals. I would have liked that. That would have added another layer of complexity. But maybe is it harder to make someone sympathize with a former Nazi scientist, or is it in the real world the United States just wouldn't have valued a Nazi scientist? I don't know if this was ever a consideration. What I'm gathering, Naked Snake is working with the CIA, but he's military first and foremost, and what I've learned from my research is that a lot of these organizations, like the CIA, the FBI, they will collaborate with military personnel to do the jobs that they cannot do. And the CIA, it's not law enforcement per se, this is a job of acquisition and evaluation of intel, so especially during the Cold War, that is vital. But in order to acquire that intel, you need to get into some very dangerous situations, which is where the Green Berets become involved. And what I'm learning from, I read Life Undercover by Amaryllis Fox. Fox. They do operate in war zones, the CIA. However, agents don't need to be soldiers. So she was operating in Afghanistan, but she was not a soldier. She had none of that training, although she did collaborate with soldiers. Harry Truman created the CIA, then the Central Intelligence Group, in 1946. In June 1942, Roosevelt created the OSS to bring together the fragmented and uncoordinated strands of the US foreign intelligence gathering into a single organization. And yeah, it makes total sense to make Snake a CIA agent because it's all about avoiding detection, all of that. Snake approaches the location Sokolov is being held, Rassvet, a Russian term for dawn or sunrise, literally first light. And it is currently the name of a module on the International Space Station. I'm pretty sure Ocelot has met the boss by now, so that further confirms my theory that this is all facade. He's pretending he doesn't know, he thinks Snake is the boss. What is with the meow? He says meow. What? That's his idea of what an ocelot sounds like, which, by the way, nothing like that. It's this horrible growling sound, I'll include it. So CQC.
What is that stance?
The CQC knife gun was invented specifically for the game by the stunt coordinator. And I'm reading from the Metal Gear Solid wiki here. Motosada Mori, the military advisor of the Metal Gear series, adapted the handgun CQC style for Naked Snake's use in Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. In an interview, Mori related how he had learned the technique as a SWAT instructor and its potential role in warfare. I really question that. I can't see it having any use, especially for SWAT. There are a lot of issues with this knife gun strategy. First of all, there is no scenario where you need to instantly switch from using a gun to a knife. One is a long-range weapon, the other is designed for close quarters. If you only have one hand free, you're not going to be able to reload, nor are you going to be able to clear cartridge jams, which will be demonstrated by Ocelot in a moment. It might look cool, but it is completely useless, and Ocelot is right to laugh at him. CQC is a generic term that doesn't refer to any specific style of combat. It really just means fighting either armed or unarmed in close quarters. The Soviet military would have been using Sambo during this time, which we sadly don't see any demonstration of in this game. The Israeli military developed Krav Maga, which is the martial arts style I study. I've also dabbled in Judo, which is where all those throwing, tossing moves that Snake does, that's where that comes from. And yes, I did study these martial arts because it makes me more like Big Boss, obviously. The combat in this sequence is questionable. When his gun jams, Ocelot freezes, leaving himself completely open for Snake to take him. He should know better than that, and probably does. He's just playing a character here. It's clear there is some kind of nepotism going on. If he is Spetsnaz, he is GRU, and he's 20. That's already questionable. It's the same thing as, Snake's a Green Beret and doesn't know what camouflage is, Apparently, no one knows what they're doing in this game. Everyone is a rookie, and yet they've got the highest ranking you could imagine. I've done a bit of forensic analysis here on Ocelot jamming his gun and how he must have done it, because it had to have been done on purpose. So what potentially happened was that he didn't push the cartridge all the way into the gun, but that's still risky. So if you look in slow motion, he doesn't pull the trigger until he's aiming upwards well above Snake. The bullet didn't even need to jam to save Snake's life, but it made the performance more convincing. If Ocelot was being serious, he would instinctively tap the bottom of the gun to push it further in, or pull it out, then rack the gun, meaning pull the top of the slider back. He definitely knows how to do this. It's a very basic thing to do with firearms. This type of jam would either be classified as a double feed or a stovepipe jam. When Snake has his opportunity to attack Ocelot, you can see how ridiculous the knife gun strategy is. Snake has absolutely no grip on Ocelot at all. I'm probably half Snake's size and weight, and I could easily break free from his hold. It's barely doing anything, if you can even call it a hold. Without the use of his hands, he's effectively made himself useless. All Snake is able to do is use his weight to force his opponent off his feet. He has no control here, and being that CQC is based on judo, grip is so important. That is how you pull someone to the ground. He has no control here, and there's no reason why Ocelot couldn't simply just back away from him or stand back up. And Ocelot always lands on his feet. When Snake takes Ocelot down, he's not gripping onto Ocelot's arm. Ocelot kind of has to keep his arm raised. Somehow Snake is able to force the gun out of Ocelot's hand while holding a knife. It's pretty laughable, although when you watch it for the first time, it's not sinking in. You're just going, hey, there's a fight, yep, whatever. And then you actually pay attention and go, oh, this is bullshit. Once we move away from one-on-one combat, it gets a little better. In fact, I quite enjoyed the way Snake summarily moving his way through the Ocelot unit. He's using each one as a human shield before getting to the next opponent. But once again, Snake has no actual grip on said opponents. Snake goes in for one proper judo toss, and it's a complete fantasy that he will be able to perform that maneuver without hands. MGSV will later give us some brutal hand-to-hand combat, and there's no knife gunning. It is much more realistic and grounded. But I mention that because, I can accept the kind of choreography based on the context. So Snake Eater and Peace Walker, they're kind of cartoonish. Ocelot goes in for one last attack. Snake takes him to the ground, dislodging the bullet from Ocelot's Makarov pistol. The bullet lands near Ocelot's head, and we will see later that he has fashioned it into a necklace. Memento for this momentous moment.
You ejected the first bullet by hand, didn't you?
So according to a YouTube comment, yes, I know this isn't the most accurate or reliable source, but there is a lot of confusion regarding why Snake asked Ocelot about ejecting the first round by hand. What happens is this. Ocelot has a fresh magazine with 8 rounds and no rounds in the chamber. He loads the first round by racking the slide. He shoots 7 shots. He puts in a new magazine of 8 rounds. He racks the slide to ensure that he has a round in the chamber. The live round he tried to eject by hand jams in the ejection port. The technique Snake is referring to is supposedly used in the Middle East to always ensure you have one live round in the chamber. You manually rack the slide every time before you get ready to fire, as it would be better to waste a single live round than be caught without a round in the chamber. Ocelot tried this technique twice, and on the second time, it caused the Makarov to jam due to a failure to eject. Ocelot does not load any bullet through the ejection port manually to get the 8+1 in the Makarov. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's not much to go on, this is just some guy on YouTube claiming this, but no, this will also be repeated in the novelization, so this is a genuine technique. Snake catches up with Sokolov near a bridge where they encounter the Shagohod. They trek across the bridge and they encounter the boss carrying the Davy Crockett. We get our first introduction to the Cobra unit, which I will briefly run through now because obviously we're going to have a lot of time to get to know them better later. You have the boss, aka the Joy, the Fear, the Pain, who abducts Sokolov with bees or hornets or whatever. They keep changing the novelization, the game guide. No one seems to be able to agree. Bees, hornets, I don't know. Just whichever you feel like saying. Inside the chopper sits the End, who quietly says, "Welcome back, boss." Pretty sure she can't hear that, but also worth noting is these eyes pop out. The Fury silently sits in the background. Then, technically, the Sorrow makes his appearance as well. The Joy knows the moment it starts raining that it signifies the presence of her former partner.
It's raining blood. Is he crying?
And I love their relationship. It's beautifully tragic. I mean, we only get hints at this. It's not like we really ever see the two together on screen, but from what we get, from what little we are shown and told, it's fascinating. I wonder if she can actually see him. Has he ever appeared to her after death? But the sound of the chopper completely disappears when the Sorrow is present. I like that little touch there. And this might be my second thesis, my theses of this podcast is, aside from the simulacra, is this non-ordinary reality. This is a term you hear with traditional hunter-gatherer cultures, this shamanic tradition of there is the ordinary world and there is this dream spirit world. I mean, you'll see the Yanomami in Venezuela, this traditional tribe, and many other tribes around the world, they'll take ayahuasca or some kind of drug, and through their dreams, their hallucinations, they will go to spiritual war with a nearby tribe and they will inflict plague or disease or rain or drought or whatever on them. Why I mention this is, and this is perhaps the foundation of a lot of our storytelling in general, you have to descend into this other realm, this dream realm, to find the truth. And obviously Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey, Hero of 1,000 Faces, you might have heard of that. It's that same thing of the hero descends into this other place. He goes out of his home, his comfort, into this other world, and he's faced with all these challenges, and he returns to his home changed. And so I think the Cobra unit, almost like in this fairy tale tradition, the hero goes on this quest and slaying a number of monsters, or, Hercules. There were the 12 labors of Hercules, and it's kind of like that. And each one of these labors, each one of these cobras will represent a different concept, and Snake will grow and learn from them. So we will get into that in later episodes. But this is, for me, the first time I realized that there was something out of the ordinary in Metal Gear, because I thought it was fairly grounded science fiction, but no, there's these fantasy elements as well. And yet it wasn't jarring to me. When I got up to this scene, I didn't just suddenly put the controller down and go, oh god, is this what this is? Oh, this is so silly. For some reason, it just felt right. I can't go into any more detail than that. Because the tone was, there's a little bit of humor, but there wasn't anything unnatural up until this point. But now this world suddenly opens out, and you see, there's all these very strange things involved. This isn't just a Cold War story. This isn't just James Bond. It feels more like, maybe Indiana Jones or the Uncharted games, where everything seems normal, grounded, and then they open up this chest or this tomb, and then some spooky shit comes flying out. You're like, yeah, why not? I'm sold. And here is our first proper introduction to Volgin. We're getting introduced to a lot of characters all at once. It's so much for me to cover. Things will slow down in later episodes. I gotta remind because I've written the scripts for the rest of this season, so I know it's not this much at once, but I have a lot to cover in this half hour. So, Kuwabara. Kuwabara means mulberry field in Japanese. In Chinese folklore, it is said that mulberry trees are never struck by lightning. Other people say that's not where this phrase comes from, but we don't know. It's funny how quickly a culture can just forget little details like that over the years. It just, one day, the last person who knew this information died and didn't realize no one else knew it. You know, it wasn't like there was someone on their deathbed going, oh, by the way, you know we say Kuwabara. Well, the reason we do that is because of this. And then they die, I guess, and then hope the next person passes that on. But Volgin's appearance seems to ward away the quote-unquote bad weather. The sorrow withdraws as Volgin appears. And we see that Volgin has facial scars, and that appears to be self-inflicted, maybe not intentionally, but he has these rubber gloves as well, so he clearly doesn't have total control of his powers. That's kind of an X-Men, that ironic tragedy that you see in X-Men where a character has a superpower, but it also has this detrimental negative side to it. It also makes it seem like these powers, they're unnatural. He's maybe the result of experimentation, and that's why he can't fully control it. This is not something he was ever made to be able to do, but we don't know. I mean, if you want to go into the bloody vocal cord parasites, nano machines shit, just bash it up your ass, man. I don't care. I don't want an answer. I just like what I'm seeing. I like the implication. Also, by the way, when he says, what a joyful scene, is that a pun? Because, you know, the joy, I'm going to assume so. And I want to say, with Delta coming out, not that I've played it yet, it will be coming out in the next few months. But I love the animation in the original Snake Eater. I think it holds up. I think they were clever in working within their limitations. They knew it couldn't be photoreal, but they didn't want it to be a cartoon, but they kind of found this beautiful middle ground where it's not Uncanny Valley, it's actually quite appealing, the characters look attractive. The only downside is that the characters' eyes tend to wander a little bit, and the hair is not good. Now, the Davy Crockett, the recoilless rifle, that does exist, and the Davy Crockett did exist. It's a real nuclear device, and I'm just quoting from Wikipedia here. A recoilless rifle, recoilless launcher, or recoilless gun is a type of lightweight artillery system or a man-portable launcher that is designed to eject some form of countermass, such as propellant gas, from the rear of the weapon at the moment of firing, creating forward thrust that counteracts most of the weapon's recoil. This allows the elimination of much of the heavy and bulky recoil counteracting equipment of a conventional cannon, as well as a thinner walled barrel, and thus the launch of a relatively large projectile from a platform that would not be capable of handling the weight of a recoil of a conventional gun of the same size. Technically, only devices that use spin-stabilized projectiles fired from a rifle barrel are recoilless rifles, while smoothbore variants, which can be fin-stabilized or unstabilized, are recoilless guns. The distinction is often lost, and both are often called recoilless rifles. The Davy Crockett, also known as the M28 or M29, entered service in May 1961, so this is very new, very state-of-the-art. Volgin asks if Snake is another one of the Joya's disciples, and he refers to, of course, the Cobra unit. The Joya assembled the Cobra unit under the Philosophers. And I'm wondering, does that count as a private militia? It was sanctioned by numerous world governments, as far as we can tell, so yes, but also no? I should also mention that the boss has worked for the CIA, SAS, and even NASA, and probably more that we don't know about. She's been everywhere. She's been involved with every major moment in history. We also don't know if she assembled these people because they had unnatural abilities, or were they modified after the Cobra unit was assembled? We'll never know. The novelization seems to imply that they were always like this.
This one is still just a child. Too pure for us Cobras.
He's 29 years old, man. I mean, he acts like a
He has
child,
not
but...
yet found an emotion to carry into battle.
And I love that concept. You know, I mentioned before about this journey that Snake goes on. Well, perhaps he will find the emotion to bring into battle. Though he never does get such a title. He just takes the bosses. Now, on the bridge, the boss easily overpowers and disarms Snake in a much more realistic fight. Their combat is always great, actually, between the boss and Snake. Those fights are fine. There's this real intensity in their grips and their movement. And when the boss launches Snake over the edge of the bridge, you can see how low she squats. You know, as a woman, she's had to learn to fight in a way that's different from men, and so all her strength is down in her thighs. So she's really using that to her advantage. She knows how to fight with the body she has. And I should mention, I haven't mentioned any of the actors, but yes, the boss is voiced by Laurie Allen, which, yes, she's also the voice of Pearl in SpongeBob. The boss's appearance, however, was based on English actress Charlotte Rampling, although I personally think she resembles Lindsay Wagner, the Bionic Woman, whom Kojima would later cast as Amelie in Death Stranding. He really does seem to have a type when it comes to, well, not just the women, but the men, you know, Big Boss and Sam Bridges. I don't know, I'm kind of getting a similar vibe there too. I know a lot of people imagined the boss was based on Cate Blanchett, which, yeah, I can see it, and also Cate Blanchett's great, and you know, I wouldn't mind. If they made a movie, even now, if they made a Snake Eater movie, yes, I would like Cate Blanchett to play that role, thank you. Simulacra and Simulation. So my choice for Simulation is the radio calls. Here's a quote from the GameStop article I mentioned in the last episode. Further enhancing the hyper-real gameplay experience are the wealthy number of optional conversations that the player can strike up over codec communication with various members of the supporting Fox unit. Some of the most compelling of these are the conversations with Paramedic. It's not surprising that Kojima would place particular emphasis on conversations with Paramedic, since players must call her if they wish to save their progress in the game before ending the gaming session. Moreover, as she can provide Snake with information on jungle survival with knowledge of plants and animals of the area along with medical advice, Paramedic becomes the most frequently contacted character in the game. As much as speaking with the paramedic is one of functionality and necessity, it is yet another creative attempt to locate the game historically and play with hyper-reality. An avid fan of films, Paramedic brings to life the context and era in which the games take place by constantly citing the films of the time. Whether she is citing the 1960s film technology or describing scenes from her favorite movies, she becomes a fountain of information about the world during the Cold War era. Most of her commentary is based on real-world fact, but with the seed of hyper-reality already so firmly planted in the narrative, how is the player to discern the small bits of fiction sprinkled in? More importantly, all of the films she referenced have relevance to the plot of Snake Eater, such as the exploration of nuclear Armageddon in the Japanese post-apocalyptic film The Last War. It can even be said that Paramedic's commentary on the value and power of cinema can be seen as indirect commentary on Snake Eater itself, as the focus of Paramedic's fascination is not simply to express admiration for the films, but also to explore how they resonate and leave a lasting impression on viewers. She often throws out statements such as, "Suspend your disbelief, that's the whole point of movies," that are directed not only to Snake, but to the players themselves. And I think that's a beautiful way of describing it. And also, Paramedic reflects, I think, what Kojima is also achieving with his own game. The movies play this role in the Paramedic's life and help her frame the context of her own reality. And I mean, I definitely have demonstrated in this episode alone that Kojima and his games have given me this unique and fresh perspective on the 20th century that I never knew before. I knew these elements disparately, but he collated them in a way I had never seen before. And so I do believe he's right in that fiction, media, art, these are so crucial. And I do sometimes doubt myself. I'm definitely more of the art persuasion. I'm not in STEM. I am not a soldier. I'm not someone, or I'm not in construction. Although, I'm a seamstress. I'm a furniture upholsterer. So I think that is a good and important job. I am helping people. I am doing something beneficial to society. But more important to me are the books I'm writing and try to get published. I'm writing a memoir. I write fiction and non-fiction. I've got a fiction story that I've been working on for, must be 14 years now at this point, which is a mix of fiction and fact. Well, looking at Kojima's work, it reminds me that no, fiction is so important, and the way he writes about, and I will quote from his Creative Gene book, but yeah, the power of movies, the power of books. It's not just entertainment. It's not just to kill time. And hopefully, when you play these games or when you listen to my podcast, this is not just killing time. It is benefiting your life in a way. The Simulacra, easily, for this episode, has to be the boss's defection to the Soviet Union. This is a lie that Snake and the rest of the world needs to believe. It appears selfish and devastating. It doesn't seem to make any sense, but what we will eventually learn is that she's making the greatest sacrifice of all. And as I mentioned, it's frustrating to see, either characters in the story or fans, players who come away from this story seeing her as only the villain. And she's not. Look, I am the #1 boss fan. I love the boss. I will die for the boss. Loyalty to the end. Yeah, she is brilliant, and the tragedy of this character, the sacrifice she makes for the greater good, it's noble and tragic, and I know I keep using that word, but yeah, it's just, look, I love her, guys. I really love the boss. I have thought about the boss and cried. Sometimes I just go, man, what would she have done in this situation? I know how the boss feels, The Piggyback Game Guide. So here is a bunch of things that I did not know when I played the game. Using food as a weapon. You can access the food menu in the weapons menu. You can place foodstuffs in the weapon window and, during play, throw them like grenades, sans the explosion of course. This allows you to distract a guard with a delicious or disgusting meal, or scare him with a living and very annoying poisonous snake. I like this little line here. Infiltration is divine, but force is fine. Flames can be extinguished with dive rolls. I did know that one. We will definitely learn how to do that with the Fury. You will only get 1 item from a corpse and 2 from a tranked enemy. Tranking or lowering the stamina to 0 of bosses will yield unique uniforms. I did not know this one, actually. Maybe the second time around I figured it out, but yeah, first time I played, I just killed every boss. They're going to explode anyway, so I'm trying to spare them. And they're trying to kill me anyway. Oh, and I like this. To manually reload a weapon, press R2 twice. I am forever accidentally reloading an MGS-V because it's way too easy to chase the button with other context-sensitive actions. So yeah, that's better. They've gone backwards. A fork allows Snake to instantly eat animals he kills with it. I wish real life was like that. God, that'd be so handy. Dogs won't attack you if you're wearing the crocodile cap, gavial cap, or monkey mask. Enemies can notice the sound of the active sonar, which I didn't use. I don't think I used a lot of those tools. Again, I was not very strategic the first time I played. I am only just now realizing in Rasfet you can climb the stairs and kick the oil drum down and blow it up, when you're fighting the Ocelot unit. Damn, sounds like fun. I wish I'd done that. You only get that once. You can only find the thermal goggles, the Choco Chip uniform, and the AK-47 assault rifle in several possible locations. Nevertheless, you'll find each equipment item only once. Therefore, if you've already collected the thermal goggles in Rasfet, you won't find a second pair in the warehouse. The same happens with the weapons, with one key difference. When you reach a later potential site for that gun, you will find the ammunition instead. But I don't have an AK-47. That said, you will never find ammunition for weapons you don't have. If a map in the walkthrough states there are AK-47 bullets in a particular spot, and you don't have an AK-47, you'll find other bullets there, usually for one of the two pistols. Discretion, better part of valor. If you begin aiming a gun but decide that you don't want to or probably shouldn't shoot, you're not obliged to let the bullet fly. If you release slowly and cautiously, you can lower the weapon without firing it. If that isn't safe enough for you, just press R1 to put the gun away. That I had never done. And I'm wondering if all these controls will be the same in Delta. We shall see. I'll definitely do an episode on Delta. Because my god, I haven't spent years on this game already. Play it for a third time. Let's go! Blowing up storage units. Usually, every enemy base has rooms which are used to store weapons or food. If you blow up an armory or a supply room with your grenade or some TNT, you can seriously weaken your opponents. Normally, your adversaries have unlimited ammunition. Near to a destroyed armory, however, the soldiers will have a finite stock of bullets. A ruined food supply will cause acute hunger for people in the vicinity. This doesn't simply reduce morale, but also leads to guards complaining a lot, making them easier to notice. Hungry guards are also more inclined to eat poisoned or rotten food when Snake throws it their way. I love that there is no end to the creativity of this game, the way you can approach it. Could you just get through Snake Eater with using only food as a weapon, poisoning your enemies, throwing it at them, distracting them? KGB versus GRU. There are differences between Snake's enemies. A member of the Ocelot unit is clearly better trained than the standard guard on patrol. These superior opponents are capable of dodging CQC attacks, and this is accurate, and I will get into that more in later episodes. That's going to be my catchphrase of this show. Now, the KGB, I don't know if I can say the whole name. It's like Komitet Gost. Look, no, please, God, no. But it was the main security agency of the Soviet Union from 1954 to 1991. And this rivalry between the KGB and GRU is accurate as well. You see it in Snake Eater, and you see that in Aquarium, the memoir by Viktor Suvorov. KGB was kind of jealous, I would say, of GRU and trying to wrest control back from them. But the GRU were much more capable, much more experienced, much more highly trained. That could count as simulation, that they do actually take that into account. That, well, if you're up against a KGB opponent versus a GRU opponent, a whole different ballgame. Run like hell. As soon as an enemy discovers Snake, he'll inform headquarters via radio. If you manage to exit the area before the conversation has ended, no alert will be raised. I never knew what the cardboard boxes did, nor how they differed, other than, hiding in them. So, cardboard box A can be used to hide from your enemies, obviously, or facilitate transportation to the weapons lab, East Wing, via lorry. Box B is addressed to the weapons lab hangar. To get transported there, you must hide in it while on a lorry, or it was written as unlorry, as the book says, unlorry instead of a lorry. Box C. This box is not a means of transport, but merely a place to hide and get some protection from the cold. The camouflage effect of a box is entirely dependent on its surroundings, and I am surprised that you can transport yourself in those boxes. I thought that was only an invention of MGSV. So they've been able to do this for years. They've already had this idea long ago. I really thought that was a new addition. Animals. As you will undoubtedly notice, there are quite a lot of species in the mission area that are actually native to other continents. And I think a lot of players have had the same thought of, why is there a jungle in Russia and why are there all these foreign species? And there is sort of an explanation, and the book says, we can safely speculate that they were probably imported for laboratory tests or as pets. That many? Okay. Some evidently escaped their cages, were abandoned during the course of experiments, spread their seeds to the willing winds. Pick your own plausible explanation. While many are thriving in their adopted ecosystems, they are poised to meet their most dangerous natural enemy yet, Naked Snake. To him, flora and fauna are but a tasty meal, irrespective of origin. The rumbling of his stomach would certainly strike terror into the hearts, were they to have them, of even the most inconsequential funguses. Fungi? Yeah, we will never know why in-game or outside of the game, why they decided to not make this realistically Russian. I don't know why this environment is like this. It seems more like a South American environment than a Russian one. Why not set it in this snowy, harsh, wintry environment? Instead, this seems more like somewhere in South America, or maybe a little bit like Vietnam. Is this just a have your cake and eat it too kind of situation? Kojima wanted this Cold War story, he wanted it to be in the USSR, but also he kind of wanted that look of Vietnam or South America or somewhere like that. I really don't know. It's quite perplexing, honestly. And though I've had fans get on Reddit and say, well, no, actually, there are areas of Russia that can kind of be like this. It's a bit of a stretch. There are no mangroves, there are no crocodiles and gavials, and no. This environment is pure fiction, and all these animals and plants and fungi, they come from all places around the globe. I don't think there are any Australian ones, as far as I've noticed, and I should notice. It's also surprising that this is an ecosystem that seems to work. If you throw that many random animals together in one environment, all hell's going to break loose. But apparently fake Russia is doing fine, as far as we can see. Camo. An old adage says that attack is the best form of defense. However, while watching the words "snake is dead" appear on the screen, after an ill-advised frontal attack on an enemy battalion armed with nothing but a fork, perhaps you should carefully consider another proverb. It is, discretion is the better part of valor. I love the humor of this book. You can get a time paradox. Sometimes it's snake is dead, the text switches over to time paradox. And I did get my first and only one in this scene when I killed Ocelot. You knock him unconscious, and I stood there and went, can I just kill him? I mean, first, I just tranked the hell out. I just made him into a porcupine. He should have died from that. That much trank is gonna kill you, man. But, no, the second time around, I just shot him in the head. And then, yes, it's, time paradox comes up. I don't think Snake is Dead showed up in that one. I think it is literally just time paradox shows up. And then, Grandpa Max from Ben 10, his voice comes out of nowhere and he says, "What are you doing? Fucking idiot, you've ruined everything. You created a time paradox." I don't think it was like that. I don't think he said that. I was very confused. I'm going to assume it's not actually Grandpa Max. I'm assuming this is a character from later games. I have no clue. Snake needs food to keep his stamina gauge on a high level. The better the taste, the better it is for his stamina. You can read why this is so important on page 10. Here you can learn what's on the menu, how you can treat Snake with a real delicacy, and which snacks have unpleasantly deleterious side effects. He loves Calorie Mate and he hates Russian rations. The camouflage is something the game doesn't tell you much about. It just kind of wants you to experiment. But the game guide says, the sneaking suit reduces damage by half and reduces stamina loss. Gakko allows you to hear keratins, so it's not just a cute uniform. Fly is a foul-smelling uniform that wards enemies from getting too close. Banana makes any food taste good, okay. Bananas are disgusting, so I don't understand this. There is Ozcam, which is designed in Australia, although hard to buy around here for some reason. I go to bloody military swap meets, I don't see it around often. This works against white backgrounds, like the final boss fight, and it will drop any damage to 2/3. And the face paint doesn't seem to have any hidden bonuses, so I'll just mention that. The Japanese novelization. I was writing the citations for the last episode and discovered that this book was published in 2014, not 2004. So it wasn't made to promote the original release of the game, as most novelizations are, so I can only assume it was meant to be a 10-year anniversary tie-in promotion. On page 38, Snake hides behind a concrete wall supporting a steel wire fence and radios the situation to the Major. "Major, I've arrived at the abandoned factory as planned. It's so old that half of it has collapsed. What kind of factory is it? There shouldn't be any human habitation around Seleniovsk. That place must be a black market factory. In the early days of the founding of the Soviet Union, economic policies failed, and even food had to be traded on the black market in order for people to survive." Snake felt tremendous excitement and a sense of accomplishment in using skill and experience to outwit highly trained opponents. If the boss were around, he's sure she would judge him for his arrogance. Even so, when he met the boss for the first time in 5 years during the debriefing, his heart awakened, as if he was reuniting with a lost family member. Another note on this page is that Sokolov was wearing a white coat. A nervous-looking man wearing a white lab coat peeked around the bed. His face was drenched in sweat. Page 50. Ocelot wears a red beret over his eyes, no backpack, and a black military uniform rather than jungle camouflage. There is no tactical rationale for his polished boots and horse-riding spurs. However, strangely, he didn't feel amiss. It's because of his tall, well-endowed physique, icy blue eyes, and piercing gaze. He stuck his index finger into the trigger guard of his pistol and twirled it deftly. He approaches slowly. Snake, still surrounded by KGB troops, stopped his movements in front of the strange sight. He was unlike any soldier Snake had encountered on the battlefield or in training. There was something special about this Slavic blonde wearing a red scarf in the late summer jungle. And I've done extensive research on the real GRU uniforms, so I have a lot to say about this one, but we've run out of time in this episode. You'll have to wait for the next one. Page 53. He blows the muzzle, then holsters his gun, as if Ocelot were in a spaghetti western movie, or as the Google Translate said, I think it was a macaroni western. I don't know, some kind of Italian pasta type situation. Good enough. Page 55. And here we finally get an explanation, possibly, of why Ocelot said meow. Ocelot bends his open left hand like a cat's claw and imitates a cat's voice. On his childish signal, other soldiers in black uniforms emerge from the shadows of an abandoned factory. Ocelot has a handgun that uses 6 of its 8 bullets in its magazine. He was trying to reload it. The distance between him and Snake was only about 3 meters. Realizing that he had messed up his timing, Ocelot suddenly pulled back the slide. However, the cartridge had been ejected from the chamber and was jamming the ejection hole. Page 57. There was a mysterious charm and humor to this enemy who called himself Ocelot, or Wildcat as Google Translate said. Snake said to the young man who was trying to imitate and adopt popular techniques from the Middle East, "You were ejecting the first bullet manually just now. Your way of thinking is not strange. However, don't go trying that out in actual combat. That's why the bullets jam." Yeah, I love how strange Japanese speech is when you translate it quite directly into English. I love it. It reminds me of a lot of early anime. And I've been watching a lot of Akira Kurosawa lately, and yeah, it's the same thing. When you look at the subtitles, you're going, no English speaker talks like that. But there's a beautiful poetry to it. I don't know. I just love it. Page 58. But his quick shooting was spectacular. Good taste, or good sense. As for, "You're pretty good," it would translate literally to good taste or good sense, so "you're pretty good." I don't know where that originates from, if that is a reference to other Metal Gear games, I will see. Even though it's not a sport, Snake applauded his efforts. As soon as Ocelot became agitated, he let go of his consciousness from his physical body, which had been supported by his mental power. Even though he had fallen on the battlefield, he looked fresh and had exerted all his strength. I don't know, I love the strangeness of that passage. Page 60 ends with the description of the Shagohod. Snake took out his binoculars from his backpack and aimed them in the direction Sokolov was pointing. Beyond the hill where the black market factory stood, there was a plateau. And then, on the ridge of those rough rocks, at that moment, the sound of gunfire shook the air and filled the mountains from the bottom up. It was coming from the upstream side of the river from the suspension bridge, from the direction of the Sokolov Design Bureau. Something he had never seen before paralyzed Snake. There was something huge and made of steel. It was like a monster from another world, with its forearms fixed to the ground, bracing itself. It was too big to be called a tank, and the mechanism that allowed it to push itself up by bracing its forearms and move forward step by step was far too illogical. It was grotesque. Smoke was rising into the sky from the turret that stretched straight upward. it was precisely because it was incomprehensible that the premonition of a terrible violence intimidated all who saw it. Snake's mouth ran dry. So with that, over and out.